What is going on, everybody? If you could all let me know that we are good to go, you know the deal. We're gonna run a quick test and then go ahead and get started. I just want to make sure that everything's good, that the sound is good. I do want to apologize in advance for it being so dark. My kitchen lights went out. So serious. But as promised, here is another one of my fur babies. This is Cenk. This is not the oldest, but he is the biggest baby, as you can tell. He is the one, the Asher. If you watch my other video, my last live stream, I had Asher, my Siamese. Asher was the biggest baby. However, he got jealous. He started becoming jealous because this one kind of took over really early. And actually, some of you all might know him from when he used to sit on my lap during my live stream shows. He actually, literally, I was supposed to give him away. And somebody already had him picked. Like, they knew they were going to get him. And then he decided that he was never going to go anywhere and just acted like the biggest baby. If I would take him off my lap, he would scream. Where you not? Where you going? You were literally just laying down for 30 minutes. What's going on? If I took him off my lap, he would scream at me. I'm not even exaggerating. He loves me holding him like a baby. Specifically, he thinks he's still 2 pounds, but he's not. But he'll probably hang out here for a little bit before we get started. Like I said, if you all could we're good. Hear me loud and clear. Awesome. If you are now watching, can you go ahead and share this, and we'll go ahead and get started here momentarily. Share this. This is going to be fun. In case you were wondering, no, I did not watch the video first, so I wanted it to be more interesting that way. I actually, come on, Twitter, get it together. What are you doing? This is what I gotta deal with. This is why I gotta put them away in the room whenever I start live streaming, because they start doing suspicious things. He's looking around now. It looks like he's about to try to step over something. He also, King is not the cat that likes to take the path of least resistance. He'll walk all over your face to get to his destination. And he'll walk in a circle, by the way, to do it. Look, he's trying to figure out what to climb over at this very moment. But yeah, definitely share this. This will be the first time that any of us are watching or listening to this, and I haven't seen it. So let me see. Come on. That's not the right caption, Twitter. Sorry, I'm trying to get Twitter to share this correctly so that we can get started. King, what are you doing? Looking guilty? Don't chew on my laptop, son. Jesus. Something wrong with him, I'm telling y'all. Something wrong with him. Okay, looks like we're all good to go. Is everybody here? Anybody else in the group chat, or excuse me, the live chat? I see Greg. All right. So I think we're all good to go. I think we're all set. So lay down. I'm gonna put you in a room. In case you are wondering why I have my cat, I said that I will bring on one of my fur babies every live stream. If you want to catch the segment of the live stream part, catch this part of the segment where I talk to my fur babies, make sure you catch the live streams. And trust me when I tell you, they all got different personalities. It's actually kind of crazy, but so I do want to go ahead and get started. I think we got everybody, or at least enough people here. And like I said, this is the first time that I've listened to this debate between Cenk and between Cenk and Kyle Kulinski. Now, I do want to premise by saying I actually have a lot of respect for Kyle. I don't always agree with everything that he talks about. I think he does. Personally, I think that he spends a little bit too much time talking about Trump. When Kyle's an extremely intelligent guy, so I know for a fact that he knows what's going on behind the scenes. I know for a fact that he could give intelligent analysis, and it doesn't have to be pro-Trump or anti-Trump. It's give the facts, right? That's I think that's really where most people want to what most people want to hear. So I'm not a fan of Cenk, y'all know that. So I am going to play this debate. Hopefully you can hear it clearly. I'm gonna play it from my iPad, which has really loud speakers, so you should be able to hear it. But I'm gonna play this, and we're gonna talk about it together and see what comes up. Let's see how this goes. I'm excited about it.
You remember, you're watching this live. Everybody else, it'll go up for you soon, and you'll get to watch it for yourself as well. But this is when you would be watching it, because you're not watching it live. Okay, anyway, we go to Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk, and he's going to join us on this issue. I brought Kyle on because he's a reasonable dude. I fancy myself a reasonable dude. And we ostensibly have a disagreement on Russia. I think it's a big deal. I'm going to characterize his position as not a big deal. But luckily he's here and can speak for himself. And what we're going to...
So let me just go ahead and say right there is, once again, why I have, like I said, I think he focuses on Trump too much at times. And I'm not saying that what he says about Trump isn't correct, but I also feel like sometimes he focuses on Trump as like he's the what is like going to be the biggest detriment to society, and I don't think that's the case. I think that Trump is just a symptom of our society. But I do tend to agree with Kyle on the Russia thing. Now, what I don't agree with is the fact that Kyle more often than not ignores all of the new information regarding Russia when he's doing his new show, when he's putting out segments every day. He puts out like probably 4 to 5 segments a day, and very rarely, if ever, does it ever talk about things like like today, the Uranium One deal that just happened that most of you all watched on my channel. He didn't talk about that. So that's one of my issues with Kyle. But other than that, cool guy. He's a good guy. I definitely agree with most of the things he says.
What we're going to try to do first is find points of agreement, which I suspect will be plentiful, and then boil down to our disagreement on Russia, and then figure out why we each have the position that we do. So, Kyle, first, can I get you to agree that that was an excellent Super Bowl?
Yes, although I do have to add the caveat that I'm one of about 17 guys in America that doesn't care at all about football.
Okay, I think that I rest my case, and I will see all of you guys later.
I didn't watch Super Bowl either, by the way.
As we move forward. All right. No, seriously, and I want to be clear, this is just a discussion. So, now, I will say that I think that Russia is a quote-unquote big deal because I believe that Trump did far worse than helping the Russians meddle in our elections. I believe that he did money laundering, and I think that he owes the Russians and is paying them back, and I think it is a wildly dangerous situation for our democracy. Okay, so what part of that, if any, do you agree with, and what part do you disagree with?
So I agree that Trump probably did money laundering. I think he did money laundering not just with Russia. I'm convinced he did it with other actors as well. I think he's colluded with other governments, perhaps in an even more clear way than he's colluded with the Russian government, if he's indeed colluded with the Russian government at all. You know, when we talk about this issue of Russiagate, I think it's actually a very complicated issue because there's many different moving parts to it. So the first question is, and you just touched on it, what is Trump guilty of? I would say that he's probably guilty of money laundering.
Which most of us agree with.
Collusion with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And
so I want to clarify something. That's pretty much, I think, well, anybody who has any sense would agree that it's likely that Trump has money laundered. I don't think there's any disagreement with anybody who's been paying legitimate attention that isn't like just gun ho Trump all the time. I don't think that there's really a disagreement there. I think that it's absolutely plausible that he's unquestionably colluding with Israel. At this very moment, he's also colluding with Turkey. I would say that's probably more so the deep state, but that's a different discussion for a different day. So, like, once again, these points that Kyle are bringing up, we all pretty much agree with that in the independent media world. Now, to the extent that we think that means that Putin hacked the elections is like, that's, I'm assuming, what they're going to debate about. And I want to hear, we're going to hear a little bit more from Kyle on that particular subject.
I also think he's guilty of other financial crimes with, there's evidence he's done it with the mafia. There's evidence he's done it with big banks and Wall Street firms. So generally speaking, I'd say I support what Robert Mueller's doing, but I support what Robert Mueller's doing because I think he can basically take out one by one Trump's cabinet on crimes like that. So, for example, what he's already done with Flynn, what he's already done with Manafort, like, I support that. So,
right there, I do believe that we need to take out people who launder money. I mean, that's just conflict of interest. It's a crime, and I feel like we do need to hold people accountable for those crimes, especially the elite, right? More so than, little peons. The elites are like, they're getting away with everything. And it seems like, to a degree, that they're largely unaccountable. But the issue that I have with what Kyle said just now was that he's like, oh, I agree, we need to hold them accountable. Unless he finishes this thought with, but that should have happened in the prior administration as well, then I'm going to say we need to stop straw grab. We can't just, we want to punish the party that doesn't agree with us so that we don't have to deal with them anymore and then move on. Like Mueller's investigation into Manafort, which I would hope Kyle knows, has nothing to do with Russian hacking. Nothing to do with that. It has to do with a business relationship that he facilitated with Ukrainian oligarchs that actually was part of the reason that Russia ended up invading Ukraine. But I don't know if Kyle knows this, but that's what happened. Manafort's conversations with Russia stemmed long before he was ever on Trump's campaign, long before there was talk of collusion. And if Manafort was as big of an issue as what they're trying to pretend he is, once again, Manafort is just a little fish that they're trying to use to bait bigger fish. But yeah, I don't agree with that. Unless his next words are the Democratic administration, who had just as much collusion, should also be held accountable, then I feel like that's suspect. That's suspect. But anyway, let's continue.
And there's a lot of evidence of the guilt of various actors in Trump's administration. But I just think that the idea of Trump being Putin's puppet or Trump doing treason is basically a liberal pipe dream that's equivalent to democratic Benghazi. Because you're never going to get Trump on treason. You're never going to get Trump on being Putin's puppet. Nor do I actually think he is those things. So I think that's the crux of our disagreement.
All right. So now let me agree back with you first on a couple of issues. I think that it is curious that we don't talk about Donald Trump's collusion with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and some of the other countries that you mentioned. Now, I get why, because there is no allegations that Saudi Arabia...
By the way,
on the other hand,
every U.S. government
Trump has very clear
has worked with Saudi Arabia
and seems to have changed our policy to suit Saudi Arabia, which is deeply problematic. And an argument could be made for Israel and certainly Turkey as well. So does the media care less about that? Because Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, etc. are ostensibly our allies. And it's uncomfortable to talk about that. And are they demagoguing Russia because it's easier? Yes. So I agree with you on that. And is the Democratic Party using Russia meddling in the elections as an excuse for their loss to Donald Trump? Yes.
Now he agrees with that. Wow.
There was a lot of different factors involved. Now, but if you think that Donald Trump has done the money laundering. As
That's
I
crazy.
Do, apparently,
he's literally been denying that for a year and a half.
Isn't that kind of a big deal? To paraphrase Biden.
No, absolutely. I think it is. I think all the financial stuff that you can get him on, of course, it's a big deal. It's a big deal in the same way that people like us went after Hillary Clinton for the Clinton Foundation, and the fact that she took a tremendous amount of money from Saudi Arabia and all of these very repressive governments, and then she did their bidding and helped them through policy. By the same token, when you look at what Trump's done, just to give people the specifics, Cenk, because I'm not sure that they know. I'm not sure people know a lot about the Saudi Arabia thing or the Turkey thing or the Israel thing, because again, the media doesn't discuss it. But in those instances, like Trump registered 8 new businesses in Saudi Arabia when he was on the campaign trail. He also took $270,000 from top Saudi officials for them to stay at his hotel. Not because they actually
I remember that, yeah.
needed to spend $270,000. That was a bribe. And they were paid back because Trump gave them a $350 billion weapons deal. And then, by the way, they took those weapons and turned around, and they're literally committing a genocide in Yemen right now. And I don't use that word lightly. I think that's the right word to use for what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen with the weapons that we gave them. So I think there's a clear connection there, and I would love it if Mueller gets him on anything. I think it'd be great. But I think the thing that frustrates me is they're focusing on the flimsier case, the case of Russia.
Exactly.
And the reason why they're doing that is because there are hawkish goals here, and these are the same hawkish goals that
Sorry about that.
have been in place for a very long time. I'm going to use the dirty word here, but the deep state has always been standoffish against Russia. We've expanded NATO towards their border.
Okay, whoa. So now, listen. I've been watching Kyle for a long time. I know he has his target audience. I'm not naive to that. But there's about 3 things that Kyle just said that I am actually very impressed by. Not only because he's saying them in response to Cenk, but he's saying them on a TYT network. And he's using buzzwords that you usually don't hear often outside, except for Jimmy Dore, who doesn't actually even work for TYT anymore. He appears there occasionally, but doesn't work for them. Kyle just said that the deep state has always been, friendly with those governments. Kyle said, he said that why are you going after Russia in that way? Like the money laundering, we all agree on. I think, like I said, anybody progressive and probably some conservatives all agree. There's 100% chance that Trump has some type of ties to Russia, to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to you want to tell? We can go Dubai, we can go Israel. Like you can go on for days about that. And I even said I don't have an issue to investigating that, and this is one thing I don't necessarily disagree with him about, but I actually probably think that he would agree with me. I don't want Mueller investigating that stuff because Mueller has clear conflict of interest. Mueller was clearly brought in because he is someone who could be trusted. If they wanted someone who could do the job correctly and do it unbiasedly and not be personally connected by people who are fired or are being fired or were just fired, then yeah, I think that would be appropriate. But he was originally brought in to investigate Comey's firing amidst the Russiagate scandal, not to investigate the Russiagate scandal. In fact, Andrew McCabe was the one who was in charge of investigating the Russiagate scandal, not Mueller. Mueller just kind of they twist the story, just like when they twisted the Manafort story. Oh, it's because of Russiagate. It had nothing to do with Russiagate. He wasn't investigated, or excuse me, he wasn't arrested and indicted because of Russiagate. They were using that as, once again, big fish to catch little fish. So, but dope. I'm glad that he actually brought up the deep state and their connections to foreign affairs and war hawking. That's good stuff. I wish he didn't call it a bad word. It's just reality. But go ahead.
When we promised that we wouldn't do that, and now because we're so obsessed with Trump's connection with Russia, you find a lot of overtly hawkish rhetoric coming from Democrats. And I know that they view it as like they're resisting Trump and they're being strong on Trump. But the reality is, when you have Rachel Maddow, for example, arguing that if Trump removes NATO troops from Russia's border, that somehow proves that Putin has the pee-pee tape, and therefore he's Putin's puppet, and therefore Donald Trump should keep NATO troops on Russia's border. I don't agree with that. And in fact, I think that's Rachel Maddow being like very neocon, hawkish, and flirting with World War III because of how she's choosing to resist Trump on the Russia issue.
Gets her paid, that's why.
If they wanted to resist Trump just on the financial crimes angle, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because I'm totally on board with that. In fact, I think I'm even stronger on that issue, because I could point out the 1,000 ways he's done the corrupt deals and he's done the collusion with other foreign governments. I mean, to give the example of Turkey, Michael Flynn took $500,000 from the Turkish government. Then Michael Flynn pushes the U.S. government to not arm the Kurds who were fighting ISIS. So that's direct money from the Turkish government, and then we did something directly to benefit the Turkish government. There's your collusion right there. That's been proven, but nobody.
I'm kind of confused about that, because I know we literally just put like 20,000 Kurds on the Turkish-Syrian border, but that's a different discussion for a different day. If anybody has any information on that particular thing, let me know, because, well, actually, no. Here's what I think. Like he said in the beginning, the deep state is extremely influential in foreign affairs, because they thrive on the destabilization of countries that have resources that we need. And I think that Turkey is just another example of that. What he said is true. However, we did just put 20,000, I think 20 to 30,000 Kurdish forces on the border. And like, I don't know if he's going to talk about this, but we pulled out of Syria, and then what happened? You know, we ended up back there just recently around the same time. So it looks like, whereas Trump did have his deals like Kyle is discussing, once again, the deep state pushed back, and we're seeing the results of that. By the way, Henry Kissinger and Trump are having a meeting today. Just want to let y'all know. But we're going to continue.
He talks about it, nobody cares, because that's not the real concern of the people who are yelping about this. The real concern is, let's move to the right on foreign policy, and let's be hawkish and escalate with Russia.
So, let alone Flynn's deal where they were planning to kidnap someone from America and deliver him to Erdogan, which is just insanity. Yeah. Now, look, people will say, and rightfully so, that's Flynn. We don't have any evidence, nor do I even suspect that Trump authorized that. Now, Trump does have business dealings in Turkey, so I wouldn't put it past them, and be happy to do that investigation, but there isn't very much evidence of that. But there's overwhelming evidence against Flynn, and hence the plea deal that he took. Now, on the hawkishness, look, I don't want to be hawkish towards Russia. I also don't want to be naive towards Russia. I don't think that they have our best interests. Sometimes I see progressives who are like, oh my God, no, Putin and Russia could be our allies. Putin is basically a dictator.
Okay, so I want to help people understand something. I don't know because I know a lot of you all have not watched TYT for quite some time, and I don't blame you. I have to watch and I have to keep up with stuff like this so that you all can know how our media is behaving. He just blatantly lied. He is hawkish. I mean, he has pretty much been instigating World War III as much as Rachel Maddow, Joanne Reed, and the rest of them. He's been totally irresponsible in his reporting. He's omitted time and time again, important information. Try to pretend like everybody he's like, oh, every progressive's like, we could be allies with Russia, like saying it sarcastically. But I'm not saying that we could be allies with Russia, because I'm not even sure how far our relationship could progress in going forward because of all the damage that we've done the last 2 decades or so. And I'm not even saying that Putin is just a righteous leader. What I am saying, however, is that any leader is going to act within the best interests of their countries. And when they do see, like, for example, the Ukrainian deal with the EU was the Ukrainian oligarchy attempting to push out Russia by importing and selling more Chinese products that are cheaper, essentially killing Russia's economy. The United States took part in that. And guess what? Russia tried to negotiate with us so that they could protect their economy, and that's why they moved in on the Ukraine. When we constantly just shit on Russia, I don't know how you expect to ever maintain even a serviceable or an amicable relationship with them. Doing things like this is one of the reasons why we can't be friends with Russia. Like, our governments can't get along. I know a lot of Russian people. I'm cool with them. But they know why we're in Syria. They're not naive. They helped Iran with their nuclear weapons and their nuclear enrichment because of our relationships with, like, Israel and Saudi Arabia. They're not naive. So when progressives say that we could be allies, I think unless I can't speak for every progressive, but I think what they're trying to articulate is that the constant fear mongering of Russia is unnecessary and would be unnecessary if we weren't imperialist fucks. I think that's what they're trying to say. Like, and the imperialism is not foundationalized in the scarcity of resources like they try and pretend. It's foundationalized in greed and the centralization of resources to the 0.0001% of the world who runs those resources. So I think that's what progressives are trying to say. But yeah, Cenk lied. He lied. He definitely hawks. Let's continue.
And if you're a progressive, you should have no interest in defending Vladimir Putin, who has been against democracy in Russia, let alone Ukraine and other places. So this whole thing of like, no, poor Putin has been, put upon by the West. I'm not buying that. I'm not interested in dictators anywhere, including Russia. But just because I don't want to be hawkish towards Russia doesn't mean that we
understand
should
also,
investigate
just really fast,
that Trump might have done with Russia. I think that I could.
Just really fast, let's be clear about something. If you think our elections are more legitimate than Russia's, as far as at the national level when it comes to the presidency and things like that, then you are naive. I want everybody to understand that. Our elections at the national level are no more legitimate. Our primaries are no more legitimate than Russia's. What, Bubba?
Have the position of,
what?
No, I don't wish to go to war with Russia, and I also don't wish to let them get away with whatever deal that they have with our president. That makes sense?
Absolutely. If that was where it ended, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but I think the problem is the consequences, not just from the position that you're taking right now, but the effects that this has had on the broader political scene. So, just to give a few examples, Democrats are now in favor of arming rebels in Ukraine. And those rebels are very unsavory characters, including there's been some reporting on how there are neo-Nazi rebels in Ukraine who are anti-Russia. And so the idea is, well, you arm them and you have a standoff over the Crimea thing. So that's not, again, you can be, like, I wouldn't say I'm anywhere near pro-Putin. Of course, I agree with you. He's an authoritarian menace. But he's a threat to his own people. And I don't think that
the people of Ukraine and the people of Georgia and potentially people of Estonia.
Okay, so then this gets into a bigger issue then. What exactly should our policies be towards Russia on that front? And, I've tried to make clear to my audience all along, every time I talk about this issue, where I stand on those policy issues. So, for example, the Exxon deal. I'm against the Exxon deal. I think if Trump ends up approving that, yes, that's a sign of corruption and cutting a deal. But I'm for the sanctions over Crimea, tentatively, because again, you have to take into account NATO's history of expanding towards Russia's border, which they view as aggression.
Yeah,
but
which they should.
I'm not in favor of, for example, the sanctions, the new round of sanctions over the so-called election meddling. Because, number one, the intelligence agencies presented zero evidence for that, and these are the same people who said that Saddam did 9/11, and so we need to do the Iraq War. And number two, we're acting like there are no consequences. We keep escalating with them and keep hitting them with sanctions on top of sanctions on top of sanctions, arming rebels that are on their border, and then we expect, like, oh, he's just going to, like, fall back in his place. No, he's a nuclear-armed power, and this is why this is a dangerous game that we're playing.
Yeah, so
I think Kyle just articulated that famously. I don't have any disagreements with anything he just said. Probably, that's probably really the best explanation that I've heard for us on the left in quite some time. Like, as far as the conciseness of the explanation, we agree on pretty much everything. We just don't believe in World War III sanctions. That's because that's what people have to understand. Our world wars weren't because people just disliked other people. The only reason Hitler scapegoated the Jews was because they were an easy target, and yeah, they didn't like them, but they weren't going to go to war. They weren't going to go to war with the Jews. But when they said the Jews are taking all the money, it's the Jews' fault that we're broke. Oh, well, then we're going to have to kill the Jews. That's pretty much what happened. It's always over money, over sanctions, oil. It's always about money. A rumor is least likely to start a war than a sanction. A sanction will, a lot of the times, absolutely start a war. Especially when it's under false pretense.
I don't want to get into a dangerous game with Russia and arming unsavory characters in Ukraine. I'm going to agree with you, mainly because whenever we go to arm unsavory characters, we don't have a great track record on that. I remember...
That's the only reason he agrees with him?
Back in Afghanistan that was fighting the Russians at the time. His name was Osama bin Laden. Oops.
Right. That's right.
So I'm against that kind of interventionism. On the other hand, Estonia is now, whether it was right to do in the first place or not, is part of NATO. So if Russia goes into Estonia, it's incredibly important that we protect Estonia. Otherwise,
why?
Don't mean anything.
So then you would potentially do World War III to protect Estonia?
Then I told you lose me on that. World War III is really hyperbolic.
Okay. Understand what he just said. And like I said, this is why I like Kyle. That's why I watch him, because he's an extremely intelligent, logical person. I think sometimes he does, caters to his audience, which is fine, because he doesn't lie. When he caters to his audience, he does not lie, which is important. So he just said, oh, they're part of NATO, and so because if they're part of NATO, like Estonia, and he even acknowledged Kyle talked about NATO's constantly encroaching on, into Russia and into Eastern Europe. And then Cenk said, oh, if they do something to Estonia, then we should step in. And then Kyle's like, so you would potentially start World War III over Estonia. And he says, oh, World War III is incredibly hyperbolic. Is it really hyperbolic, people? Is it really hyperbolic? We're in Syria right now. The reason that we're so obsessive over Turkey, in case you didn't know, is because Turkey is the last Eastern European country until you get to the Middle East, and we've launched a number of attacks out of Turkey. We have troops in damn near every industrialized and non-industrialized country in the world. We've been fighting war in some way, form, or fashion. Some people think that they think it started in 2001. That's probably the big one that you remember. However, that war started probably in like the 1980s. We were in Libya. Our special forces were already in Libya in the 80s and in the 90s. We were in Nigeria in the 80s and in the 90s. We have been fighting perpetual warfare in a proxy warfare fashion all over the world, with a bunch of other countries involved for like 3 or 4 decades now. The idea that World War is so far-fetched because it's something that doesn't affect him. He's never lost a loved one. He's never had his home bombed. He's never had to go fight. He's never been to basic training. He's never had to even think about the concept of going to school joining the military simply to pay for your school. Going to the military simply to have some sort of stability and security. So the idea of World War III is just unfathomable to somebody like Cenk. To somebody like me who has had friends die needlessly in these wars. For somebody like me who has seen families separated in Syria, in Iraq, hell, even in Palestine. They pretty much have a daily war there also. People who I've seen, my friends who have not talked to their families in years, people. So it's hard to convince everyone else that World War III isn't happening right now. But as far as Russia is concerned, to pretend like World War III is quote unquote hyperbolic is laughable. We already know that Russia is about the business. They are, especially with somebody like Putin who's just waiting for an excuse. The moment we stepped in Syria, we're like, oh, we're going to institute a no-fly zone. Russia said, okay, bet. I bet we're still going to fly. I bet we're still going to do what we want to do, and I bet you're not going to do anything about it. Because you can't upset the balance right now. We can. We have nothing to lose, essentially. We don't have an image that we're losing. I mean, Russia makes it pretty clear about what they're doing most of the time. I'm sure some of it is encrypted, but it's... We don't trust the United States, so we're going to defend whoever doesn't trust them either. They're pretty clear about that. Fucking World War III is hyperbolic.
Super hyperbolic.
Super hyperbolic.
So like whenever like sometimes some folks on the left you like get into a situation about what should we do about Russia, sanctions, not sanctions, etc. Boom, World War III card, right?
Well,
so you can do things about his incursion into Georgia, Ukraine, and Estonia short of launching nukes.
Well, right, but again, if we're what we're doing right now is we have a NATO buildup on his border, and that's like if Russian troops all of a sudden were right on the border of Mexico. Every single politician in the U.S. would say, "Get the guns ready. It's time to fight back."
Absolutely.
For some reason, when we put NATO troops on his border, and that's viewed as like, oh my God, if you're against that, you're a Putin puppet.
Exactly.
Oh,
man. Bruh, Kyle is like hitting it out of the park right now. Hold on. Really, Asher? This is why you go to the room. I don't know. Just call me, but they're gonna leave a message. I'm gonna rewind in a second.
We have a NATO buildup on his border, and that's like if Russian troops all of a sudden we're right on the border of Mexico. Every single politician in the U.S. would say, get the guns ready, it's time to fight back. But for some reason, when we put NATO troops directly on his border, that's viewed as like, oh my God, if you're against that, you're a Putin puppet. And that's,
no, I don't think you're a Putin puppet. I don't think anybody's a Putin puppet in that regard. But if you say, hey, maybe we should have Estonia, Latvia, etc. withdraw from NATO, that's an interesting argument. But it's a different thing to not defend Estonia if they are part of NATO.
Well, let me just say, I'll just go on the record now and say I would not send U.S. troops to fight to protect Estonia. And you could say that means I'm weak on Russia or whatever the case is. Sorry, but I don't think, yes, potentially risking, I'm not saying it would lead to World War III, but if we get into some sort of a hot war over Estonia, I don't think it's worth it to send, men and women from Kentucky who never heard of Estonia until 3.5 minutes ago to maybe fight and die to protect them. And again, this all goes really back to the issue of NATO and who's really at fault here. Like, again, I said I'm tentatively for the sanctions over the Crimea thing, and the reason I say that is because we lied to Russia. When the Soviet Union was broken up, we said, listen, we're not going to move an inch towards your border, and then we kept moving towards their border.
We did.
That's a provocative action. That's an aggressive action. And that's not something we would tolerate from them. Look at what happened when they put missiles in Cuba and pointed them at us. We said, oh, shit, we're going to war. The fact that we have them in that position right now, again, I'm just trying to get people to see this from both sides. And that doesn't mean that Putin's a good guy. He's a menace against his own people. But I don't think he's a threat in the same way that people are being hyperbolic and acting like, he's going to lead to the fall of Europe. I don't agree with that.
Yeah. So now let's let me just finish that topic and move on to other stuff that's more relevant. So,
sure.
In terms of like encroaching into Russia, it's a super fair point that if they were had troops in Mexico or Cuba, for example, that we would lose it, and we have. That's a fact. And that Estonia is an Estonia throw away from Russia. I get all that. And maybe we shouldn't have brought NATO that close to Russia. We have a disagreement on the just we have that treaty. We do. And if you let him take Estonia, then he can take whatever country he wants. Now, luckily, he hasn't done that yet. Okay, so and I wouldn't want to signal to him that it might be okay to do that because look at what happened in the first Persian Gulf War. But that's okay. I get it. People get both sides. Now let's go to the heart of the issue.
Sure.
So when you talk about no evidence, I don't agree at all. So let's figure out what we mean by that. So first of all, there's a recent story that just came out about the Dutch media had insiders from Dutch intelligence saying they tapped into Russia's hacking. So they hacked the Russians while the Russians were hacking us. And not only did they see in their computers that they were hacking the U.S. State Department, the Democratic Party, the White House even.
Oh, the convenient. Oh, that's so convenient.
Our intelligence officials that. But they actually tapped into the cameras and saw the Russians doing it with their own eyes. So
the Russians doing what?
The Russians
Kyle,
hacking in.
okay, so let me say something. Because y'all see my face right now. If you could see Kyle's face, in which he is known for his stank faces, but if you could see Kyle's face, he's like, really? All that, huh? The Dutch caught all that. They caught all that. They said they hacked them coincidentally and simultaneously while they were hacking the Democratic Party and while they were hacking the elections and while they were hacking the State Department. Wow. And they got all of it on video. And they know for a fact that while it was going on, it was on, like, that was them on video hacking them. Wow. That's impressive as hell. And weirdly coincidental. But let's continue.
I mentioned State Department, Democratic Party, etc. This is pre-Podesta emails. Okay.
So Russian government was hacking our government, basically.
Yes, the Russian intelligence officials that were in a university campus near Red Square that was doing it. So that's evidence.
What?
Well, sure, but we're doing the exact same thing to them.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Okay.
So should everybody sanction us because we do it to them? I mean,
if they can prove it, yeah.
That's the stupidest.
We meddle in people's elections all the time. It's outrageous, wildly counterproductive, and has been fairly disastrous.
So, mind you, once again, nobody, including Kyle nor myself, has said that Russia has never tried to hack the United States. And this is apparently, as he's quoting, he said this is pre-Podesta emails, supposedly. So all he is, and we've already actually acknowledged the FBI, I think, was the ones who acknowledged that, yeah, the State Department emails got hacked because Hillary put them in an unsecured server in her damn bathroom. So that, once again, we're not disputing that. We know already that Russia tries to spy on us and vice versa. Yeah, like I said, y'all literally, I just put a video out spending 45 minutes talking about how we put an FBI informant who is posing as a businessman in Russia for an extended period of time to spy on their uranium deals. We both do it. Does that make sense? Nobody is claiming that. But there's nuance to foreign policy that is not being considered by anyone perpetuating the myth that somehow Putin worked with Trump to hack an election. And then he says, oh, that's proof. But unless I'm crazy, in the beginning of the debate, it was whether or not they colluded to steer the election in favor of Donald Trump. That's clearly not what happened. Like, that's not proof of that. He's like, oh, guess what? Russians make attempts to hack the U.S. government. Can you believe that? We should do sanctions. And then he says, oh, the United States deserves sanctions for what we do in other people's. And I'm not saying that we don't. But what I am saying is that he refuses to acknowledge how often the United States interferes with it. We're trying to institute a regime change right now in Syria. Nobody is talking. In fact, not only are other countries not talking about implementing sanctions on us, which would be hard for them to do, but they're not talking about implementing sanctions on us. But then we even took it a step further, and Rex Tillerson said we are going to implement sanctions on anyone who works with Syria. And on top of that, they encourage all the other countries who had previously worked with Syria or Iran, both of those countries, If they don't implement sanctions on them, that they will likely feel sanctions from us. Sanctions have literally never helped anybody. It kills innocent people. It kills civilians. And they know that. Because when innocent people are pissed, they take it out on their government, whether it be rightfully so or illegitimate. They still take it out on their government. So to pretend like you're okay with us getting sanctioned by everybody we deserve it from is fucking laughable. Like, Cenk just be... It's so funny. Because Kyle is really... He's being very rational. He's trying not to laugh at Cenk. I can see it. I'm not going to lie to you. I'll post the link, by the way, in the description, but I can see it. He's laughing. He's trying not to laugh. And Cenk is trying to seem reasonable despite everything we've seen him say in the last year. And it doesn't, and he's saying, like, I think we agree on this. I've never said anything about, yes, you have. Stop lying. Anyway, let's continue.
Well, but for us, I mean, look at all the coups we did. I mean, you want to talk about meddling? We killed democratically elected leaders in foreign countries. We did coups against guys like Mossadegh in Iran, and then wondered why they hate us. So if you say for us to not meddle in other elections, I love it, brother. Totally agree. But that doesn't mean we should let the Russians do it to us either. So
let me ask you then, what do you think the punishment should be for them in this instance?
World War III. No. Look, see, then you get into a super interesting conversation because you got to break it down, right? So there is meddling in our election, and we have to break that further down. What does that mean exactly, right? And then there is the money laundering that we talked about. So let's do it one at a time. When you talk about meddling, okay, so if the heaviest charge the Democrats have, and I think when they started, this was their heaviest charge, because they're actually not that bright, and they didn't even have any idea how corrupt Donald Trump actually is, right? And their main charge was they stole Podesta's emails and DNC emails, and that's the biggest crime in American political history. No, I think that's small potatoes. And
well, I'll go a step further. I'm in favor of that. I wanted to see those WikiLeaks emails. Where look, I view that this exact same as I view like the Snowden Greenwald leaks. Like here's the information about how the NSA is spying on everybody. Oh well, thank you very much for the public service of releasing that. That should not have been a thing that the public doesn't get to see. By the same token, if one party's rigging a primary, yeah, I want to see it. I don't care who the source is or how we got it. I'm still happy that we saw it.
Absolutely.
So I'm only halfway towards you because on the one hand, I want to see the Pentagon Papers. I want to see what Snowden released and Manning released, and it helps inform us in our so-called democracy, such as it is, right? And so I'm in favor of that. People keep talking about, oh my God, WikiLeaks, they had it. Yeah, if the New York Times had it, they'd publish it, and they did, right? So I don't see any issue with that at all. So I'm not trying to punish WikiLeaks. I'm not trying to punish anyone who published it. I think it was super useful information, and we covered it on the show a lot, for which we got tremendous heat from the Democrats.
Oh my God! Stop pretending like you're not establishment.
It's one thing that happens. It's another thing, though, if a foreign government, whether it's Russia, China, or Saudi Arabia, goes, I got the emails of the Republicans and the Democrats, but I think the Republicans are going to help me, and the Democrats are going to hurt my interest. So I'll only release the Democratic ones.
That doesn't make any. There's no.
So I tricked you into voting for the guy who's actually going to do what I want.
No.
That's problematic.
That sounds silly.
Sure.
There's no proof of
what I
that.
would say to that is, number one, of course, I'm in favor of seeing whatever dirt the Republicans have too. I'm consistent in my approval of leaks. But number two, what are the consequences of? So let's assume that's true for a second. What are the consequences of that? So Putin preferred Trump, but why would he prefer Trump? Well, one of the reasons was Putin is backing Assad in Syria. That's his ally. Trump had said repeatedly on the campaign trail, look, I'm not going to get involved in Syria. Let's let Vladimir Putin handle ISIS, and let's leave the Assad government alone. Now,
started like that.
I hate to be contrarian here, but I totally agree with them on that point. Now, unfortunately, Trump didn't actually follow through with that, which gets to the point of, I think, the evidence being flimsy overall for some sort of a deal between the Russian government and Trump, or Putin and Trump, because So at the end of the day, what can you point to where you say, oh, no, he definitely did a deal with them? You could point to, for example, oh, he didn't implement the sanctions over the election meddling. But
yeah, that's kind of a big deal.
It's not a big deal because no proof.
That's only 1/5 of the picture because, for example, Trump did just 3 days before that story came out, Cenk, on that Friday, CNN had an article about how they just implemented a new round of sanctions over Crimea. So, okay, he doesn't do one set of sanctions, but he does a different set of sanctions. Then, like I said, he armed Ukrainian rebels who are anti-Russia. So it's a weird thing to do if you're that guy's puppet to arm the people who are fighting him. Then he bombed the Syrian government. That happened a few months ago. And then they also recently, the State Department announced this. We're staying in Syria indefinitely.
Yep.
You know, that was a huge story to me, but it got next to no coverage in the media because, again,
me and him both.
That's one of those stories where if you cover that, the only logical takeaway is, well, he's definitely not acting like Putin's puppet if he wants to permanently, militarily occupy the nation to be against the government that is Putin's ally.
Thank you.
A weird way to be a puppet to somebody. And then, like I brought up before, he kept NATO troops on Russia's doorstep. They're there right now, and he didn't approve the Exxon oil deal. So, yes, I grant you that, okay, he didn't implement the sanctions over the so-called election meddling. That's one policy that can be viewed as pro-Putin. But I just gave you 5 others that are massively anti-Putin. And this goes back to the point I made at the beginning, why the Saudi Arabia issue is bigger to me and the Israel issue is bigger to me. We haven't even discussed the Israel one in detail, because if you do a deal with those governments, the downsides are actually worse. So the downside of a Saudi deal is we just gave a theocratic dictatorship $350 billion worth of weapons, and they're bombing women and children in Yemen.
Yeah.
You know, the consequences of a deal with Israel is Jared Kushner, for example, took a lot of money from Israeli banks, and in turn, the Israeli government called the Trump administration when he was president-elect, and they got them to fight back against the UN. They said, call all the countries you have connections with at the UN and try to get them to be against the resolution condemning the illegal settlements. So that's collusion where they're doing something in favor of a government, and I think it's way more damaging than, for example, if he did Putin's bidding and stayed out of Syria. In fact,
everything that he just said right now is fucking golden. We cannot talk for some, you know, we want to. We only have so many hours in a day and so many gigs of video footage that we can upload, you know, after it becomes redundant. But we can't start to focus on the things that we need to be focusing on every single day, like what he was talking about with Trump's relationship with Saudi Arabia, with the bombing of Syria and the putting troops back in Syria indefinitely, his relationships with Israel. These are the things that I would love to be covering every day. But every day we get distracted with a lie that the independent media, who I believe it's our job to fix them, it's a lie that we have to fix, that we have to clarify and correct, because it would be really easy to just talk shit about Trump every day. It really would. But it's we know what well, except for that type of stuff, which I try to cover when I can, but I'm not going to spend an hour and a half talking about how Trump's racist when we know he says racist shit. We know this. But what I would love to spend an hour talking about is how his policies are killing women and children overseas, and he's laughing about it, pretending like he's, you know, he's separate from the deep state when they're actually one and the same. I would love to talk about that more often, and I do, but we get distracted, that's the point of all of this, in case you haven't been keeping up. That is the point of the Russia discussion. That is the point of John Brennan joining CBS. By the way, the leader of the disinformation campaign, former director of the CIA, the same CIA who made it pretty clear that their job is to mislead and misinform the public. John Brennan's back on CBS. They've even called up George Bush. Come on, people. We're getting attacked by so much information and misinformation from so many different angles. That's why we, progressives specifically, I think, get pissed off when people want to talk about Trump. We think we should investigate Trump. Why shouldn't we? I think it at least deserves an investigation. Okay, that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with the investigation. No, well, not the investigation itself. What I have a problem with is its premise. I have a problem with the premise of the investigation. It's solely based off the fact that Putin wanted Trump to win, which, once again, I've covered extensively. There's no evidence of that. In fact, it would be evidence of the opposite. He would probably want Clinton to win. On top of that, So on top of the fact that there's no evidence that he wanted Trump to win, is the simple truth that there's no evidence of the 17 intelligence agencies. No, it got retracted. The article is no longer exists because it didn't happen. And all these players are coming in to make the conversation always about Russia. And independent journalists like myself, Kyle, Jimmy Dore, Tim Black, H.A. Goodman, I mean, the list goes on. We're trying to avert World War III and make sure that people are educated so that when this issue comes up again, and indeed it will, we will be prepared for it, hopefully, a lot more than what we're seeing right now. Let's go ahead and continue.
I would have liked it if they stayed out of Syria.
So, look, the fact that you might like a couple of those positions, whether they were derived from collusion or not, and as part of a deal with Trump or not, to me is immaterial. Yeah, sure. I don't want to do bombing in Syria either, but if I find out it was because Trump, not out of the goodness of his heart or because he had the correct policy position, did it because of what he owed the Russians, I'm going to have an issue with that.
Sure, on principle, sure, you could do that.
Yeah. And come on, look at the way that he did the Syrian bombing. Oh, golly gee, I am going to bomb those dastardly Syrians. I will bomb an airway that they are not, a runway that they are not using. I will bomb.
By the way, they actually did use a lot of that stuff. They evacuated.
I know exactly where they are, but I will not bomb.
They were given a warning and evacuated.
Getting tough on Russia.
Well, why stay there indefinitely then?
Okay, so that's point number 2. Great question. So Donald Trump is, not, thank God, not the dictator. There are a lot of things he wants to do, and he keeps getting blocked. Everybody knows that he didn't want to do the sanctions on Russia. They passed it 98-2 in the Senate, overwhelmingly in the House, and he signed it, even though he said, I don't want to sign it. He had to sign it. And then there is, yes, 4-step play. You can call him deep state. You can call him mid-state, you can call it whatever you like, right?
Or hawkish on Russia.
All state, they're all in favor of hawkishness everywhere, and including on Russia. So they put a ton of pressure to, hey, Mr. President, you got to stay in there. And the knucklehead from time to time goes, oh yeah, okay, who's the last guy in the building? Okay, that guy? All right, fine. Yeah, and now John Kelly's his chief of staff, and he's largely driving policy. Now, when you, on the issue of the sanctions, one of the things that they, quote-unquote, implemented was they came up with a list of Russian oligarchs and then said, okay, here's a list because you made us do it because it's in this goddamn bill that we didn't want to sign. What are we going to do about it? Oh, nothing. We're not going to freeze their assets. We're not going to do anything. It's just a list. Okay, are you happy now? So, no, the main thing is the sanctions.
You can't freeze assets for someone
then he was forced to sign it, and then he refused to impose them anyway, even though it's his legal obligation to do so. Gee, I wonder why he did that.
But again,
do you think, Kyle, it's because that he has a ideology that he thinks on political philosophy?
No. Of course I don't. Of course I don't. But here's the thing. I don't care. If he somehow stumbles upon the right policy for the wrong reasons, fine. Now, I hear you that, okay, you could object to that on principle and say, well, Mueller should still do his thing. And I say, I agree with you on that. But at the end of the day, I find it hard for me to get mad if he stumbles on doing policies that I agree with. So, for example, let's just say, for argument's sake, it was because of collusion that he decided we're not going to go into Syria at all. We're going to stay totally out. I would say,
I'm fine with that.
Good. I'm happy that we're staying out of Syria. And even if it was a horrible way in which we got to that conclusion, it's just hard for me to get angry if he stumbles upon doing the proper policy. But then this gets to a deeper question, which is what's the end game? Because again, I agree. I like that Mueller is taking out his cabinet one by one, Flynn, Manafort on financial crimes and money laundering. And in fact, I think my case is bolstered by what Steve Bannon said, because Steve Bannon said, no, you're not going to. They buried the lead in an article from a few weeks ago. And basically, Steve Bannon said, it's money laundering, stupid. That's what he argued. So in other words, all the headlines were like, Bannon calls meeting with Russian nobody treasonous. But then you read the article, and in like paragraph 6, they're like, Bannon's like, no, it's the money laundering. They're going to get him on the money laundering. Which, okay, good. That's good. That's great. But
which we all know
this
exists.
is, I think, another part of my frustration on this issue.
But you're not going to be able to impeach him.
Cenk, there is no end game here, because let's say you knock out all of Trump's cabinet. Great. Knock out all of them. Kushner, Ivanka, whoever. I don't care. Knock them all out. Then you're left with Donald Trump. And what are you going to have? The overwhelming majority Republican Congress impeach him? And then even if you do that,
it's not going to work.
You get Mike Pence, who's just as bad,
if not worse.
If not maybe worse, because he's actually sly and clever, and he's a true fundamentalist Christian Kool-Aid drinker and a believer in, trickle-down economics and all that stuff. He's Donald Trump, who sounds slightly more intelligent with a smirk and a true belief in fundamentalism. So
Kyle, look, there's
let me just real quick. Let me just say one more thing real quick, which is, I think this issue allows the Democrats to resist without resisting.
Exactly.
And every second they're sucking the air out of the room by going on and on. Russia. That's a second they're not talking about Medicare for all, or free college, or a living wage, or ending the wars, or a New Deal.
That's a touchdown, baby.
They're actually going to get them to win.
That's a touchdown.
And I was going to save this for later, but I'll just bring it up now. There was an article in The Hill in June, and this is from a poll that they did. Listen to this, Cenk. A majority of voters, I'm quoting from the article, a majority of voters are against the Russia investigations and are eager to see Congress shift its focus to healthcare, terrorism, national security, the economy, and jobs. Those are the findings of the latest Harvard-Harris poll survey. 64% of voters said the investigations into President Trump and Russia are hurting the country. So, in other words, my point is, even if you're right about all of this, it's still terrible politics, and it's turning into Democrat Benghazi. Even if you say there's a there, it's turning into Democrat Benghazi, and it's going to lose the Democrats in elections.
All right, good. There's plenty for me to disagree there, but also plenty for me to agree on. So let's get going on that. So first of all, when you say this is resisting without resisting, absolutely right. Totally agree. So it's an excuse not to talk about policy issues because their donors don't want them to talk about policy. Talking about Russia is easy. It's an easy way out. It doesn't cost their donors a dime, right? In fact, it might make defense contractors more money. So totally agree on that. And they're using it as an excuse. But Kyle, I have an issue with sometimes it appears that what you're saying is, well, I like the policy position he's winding up at, so, whatever, right? No, I mean, I might like a couple of those policy positions he winds up at, but I care deeply that how he got there, because that affects the next set of elections and the next set of elections, and whether we have a guy who is controlled by a foreign government. That is super important and relevant. So
now he cares about people being
against Putin. So how can, if he did one policy for Putin, not implementing the election meddling sanctions, but he did the 5 other ones I listed that were against, I don't think you can reasonably conclude he's his puppet.
No, Kyle, that's crazy talk. So, all right, I shouldn't say that. Okay,
yeah, that's not anywhere near crazy. That's accurate.
No, first of all,
it's getting good.
They changed, for example, the Republican policy, and then this was brought up at the time, even before.
This is where Cenk starts stuttering because he's full of shit.
To say that they changed our policy, the Republican policy on Ukraine. That was real. They changed it. Now, because Trump doesn't have the political force to be able to do it when he's president, doesn't mean he's not trying to do it. So, can he unilaterally roll back NATO and say, okay, I'm kicking Estonia and Latvia, etc. out? Of course not. Of course not. So if you say, oh, well, he still has troops on Russia's border, that has nothing to do with Trump. He couldn't possibly change that even if he wanted to and made it his top effort. So on the issue of the Syria and the bombings, like I told you, those are totally nonsense, fake bombings. And
I don't agree, by the way.
oh, really? Come on, man.
No,
the new planes are sitting there and they don't bomb them, and they bomb the old planes that are already broken down. That's going, look at me, Daddy. I am against Putin and Assad.
No. But that's not the only time they bombed the Syrian government.
Okay, so let me just clarify something real quick. First of all, those weren't fake bombings. Okay, so they were real bombings. They were alerted and evacuated beforehand. It was supposed to be a warning. But that part where Cenk was like, oh, that's crazy talk. What's crazy about that's where I'm like, is he doing, I'm so confused. I'm like, is Cenk just an idiot? Or is he doing this like for some other reason? Is he being controlled by those who are paying him? You know, it's like, how was any of that crazy? And first of all, I will say that Kyle handled that a lot better than I would have. I'm like, crazy talk, boy, you a dumbass. You don't get to call my he disagreed with things that were logical and factual, mostly factual stuff. And I don't understand why exactly that even could be close to the class of crazy talk. But whatever, let's hear him defend the rest of his bullshit.
There were 4 or 5 occasions where they bombed the Syrian government, even in the midst of them fighting ISIS. One time they did it. So that's not anything to scoff at. They're on the wrong side, and they're in the process of being on the wrong side, they're escalating with Putin. And that's another one of my concerns, is that as we keep pushing towards a further escalation, the Democrats are resisting from the right, not from the left. And like, for example,
that's deeply troubling, and I agree with that.
Well, let me give you one more example, because I think this one really paints a stark picture. So the other day, there was a story about how a Russian jet flew 5 feet away from a U.S. jet. And you didn't hear anything in the media and nothing from the Democrats. Now, if the Democrats really wanted to resist, here's how you resist on that. You go, oh my goodness, we almost got into a confrontation with Russia. What is Trump doing? Why is he being so reckless? What we need him to do is get out of there. What are our planes doing on the Black Sea by Russia's border? Why are we there? Get them out of there, because we can't say Trump is a thin-skinned dictator, buffoon, madman with a terrible temper, and oh yeah, isn't it the better thing to do to fly U.S. planes near Russia's border and put NATO on the border? I think if you believe he's a crazy person, which I do, then you should be screaming at him and resisting from the left. Say, get the troops out of there, get the planes out of there. I don't want to accidentally start a conflict with Russia. And again, my point is, the Democrats are not making that argument. They didn't even mention that at all, because they're resisting from the right. Every time they resist Trump on Russia, they're saying, well, I don't know why you're not putting more troops on NATO's border. Maybe you're Putin's puppet. And that's a problem.
I, of course, am not in that camp. We're both deeply progressive. So,
one of you is progressive. One of you.
That conflict is totally unnecessary. I think the Democrats, I'll go further, on the issue of the FISA warrants. Now they're in a position where they're the establishment, and they're fighting for FISA court to do more spying on Americans. And so, do I think the surveillance of Carter Page was justified? Yes. Do I think they should do warrantless surveillance of American citizens? No. And yes, the Adam Schiff's.
So once again, he has a team full of researchers. He said, do I think the Carter Page warrant and surveillance was justified? Yes. Carter Page worked for the FBI, people. He worked for the FBI since 2013. You know why Carter Page was talking to the Russians? Carter Page was talking to the Russians because the FBI asked him to talk to the Russians. Actually, no. He volunteered in order to help the FBI. That's why they have so much intel on him talking to the Russians. You remember in the article that came out about Carter Page talking to the Russians? They're like, there was a wiretap somewhere in the room, and they got him talking to Russians, and he was investigated and interviewed by FBI. The wiretap was on him, people. He volunteered to have the wire on him. It's a smokescreen. It was bullshit from the beginning, and it's bullshit now. But anyway, let's continue.
of the world, etc., are now pushing from the right, and it's gross. But I think that they could be wrong. And by the way, let me further agree with you on the politics of it. I mean, Elizabeth Warren was on the show. Now, to be fair to her, it was really a while back at this point. But she said the #1 issue in the 2018 elections with the Democratic Party should be Russia. And I was thinking, no, that's a terrible idea. Terrible.
Yeah, this is all he talks about. But anyway.
So, for me, I think they should do the Russia investigation, even though it might be bad politics and even bad policy in terms of pressuring, so-called pressuring Trump to go in the wrong direction. They should do it because we need to find out if the president is working for us or working for a different country. That's monumentally important.
So I want to clarify something, people. I want to make sure my thing didn't fall off. But it's so crazy to me that now we're concerned whether or not our president is working for us or working for a different country. Is that not crazy to anybody else? Does that not bother anybody else? I feel like Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, Nixon. LBJ probably was the only one who worked for himself, quite literally. Well, not really, because he got paid to put those canals in Vietnam. So even LBJ to a degree. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only one who possibly did not work for another country was the one who got murdered in broad daylight. So and this is a question that I've always asked. I'm like, who's in your pockets? Because that can oftentimes indicate who you're going to look out for. And he's just like so concerned about it now. You weren't concerned about and once again, I get it because it's the president. So yeah, because Trump's the president, it's a big deal. But you were touting the whole Russia bullshit before there was the accusation that Trump was colluding with Russia. So remember, because at first it was just they were hacking, and then it was they were colluding, which is bullshit. You knew it was bullshit by the timeline. But at first it was we need to find out if Russia's hacking our elections, and now it's we need to find out if the president's colluding with Russia. We have so many more issues. That's just on the scale of governments trying to affect our elections. It's down here because it happens, and we know it happens, and it's a problem we need to deal with. But that is not what caused the outcome of the general election.
So I can't say, well, I kind of like some of his policies in that regard. So, right? No, not
But then you're abandoning the money laundering thing you said, though, because originally you said, well, look, this is really just about money laundering.
See, thank you.
No, we need to keep investigating to see if he's working for a foreign country. Now, when I hear that, I think that's really goofy, and that's not what's happening. He's not Putin's puppet.
No, definitely we have, the heart of the disagreement.
Yeah, so, I think he did money laundering. You think he's a puppet to Vladimir Putin.
No, I think he did money laundering. And hence, he's a puppet to Vladimir Putin.
What? That's the same thing.
What's important?
This man, Cenk, is.
So the so-called stolen emails. Anybody could have gotten those emails. Any media organization could have published those emails. I think it was, in fact, the Russians who got it. Or maybe it was the Russians and someone else. But I don't think that's a thing that, to your point about what's the end game here, that's not a thing that you take a president down over. I mean, if Hillary Clinton had gotten access to Trump's emails from whatever source and use it during the campaign, nobody would have said a peep, if you ask me. So even if they think that that's a huge deal, they'll never impeach him over that. That is not enough. I think obstruction of justice is the middle ground, and I don't know if that's impeachable because, then it depends. It depends on how bad it is. And we can see with our own eyes it's pretty bad. He's firing everyone who's investigating him. So I don't know how that one gets resolved. To me, money laundering's on the other end of the scale. Really, really bad. And we got to get him the hell out of office because he's a lifelong criminal. And one of the criminal deals that he made, if we're right about that, and hence the need for the investigation, is a deal with Russian oligarchs who all work for Vladimir Putin. And they're not interested.
That's a broad brush.
Oh, well, we have.
By the way, it's not necessarily true.
All of our money, all this money of ours, but we don't.
So I want to say something. Like, that's like intellectually lazy. Like, oh, all Russian oligarchs work for Vladimir Putin, so we're all gonna like. That's like saying that every CEO in the country works for Donald Trump. Nah, I'm not saying that. Most of them may not like him. I'm saying like most of them, even half of them may like him. A lot of them probably don't like him because he's kind of ignorant. They will use him at their disposal, but for the most part, I think that they don't get along very well because he's, to be totally honest with you, is not known as a very good businessman amongst the elite. But that's like under his claim. That would be extraordinarily similar to saying like all the oligarchs in this country work for Trump, and all the oligarchs prior to him worked for Obama, and all the oligarchs prior to him worked for Bush. And it's lazy. It's like he wanted Trump to institute a sanction on every Russian oligarch and freeze their American assets. That's problematic. Private citizens. If you don't have clear proof that they have done something like that on that scale, then you can't start freezing the assets of private citizens. Period. That's a problem. Once again, no such thing as an innocent billionaire. Let's be very clear about that. But it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope, people.
I don't want to ask for anything in return. We're Russian oligarchs. Of course, they ask for something in return.
No, this is definitely the crux of our disagreement because, listen, what I would say is, even after hearing all that, I still don't for the life of me understand why what wouldn't be put front and center is the collusion that Trump did with a foreign government, which led to weapons being sold to them and a genocide being carried out with those weapons. Because even if I grant you everything you just said, we already have all the evidence on the table for an even worse case of collusion. But again, there's a reason why that's not the issue being brought up, and the issue being brought up is the Russia issue, because, look, the deep state and all of the politicians don't care that we did Israel's bidding and there were corrupt deals in the process done.
Exactly.
Trying to get other countries to not care about illegal settlements under international law. That's a giant scandal, and they don't care that our weapons are currently funding a genocide in Yemen.
Exactly.
Because they're our allies, so we look the other way, and even though there's an even clearer example of a corrupt deal, and Trump doing the bidding of those governments,
exactly,
it doesn't even register. But
exactly.
The final thing, Cenk, that I wanted to talk about, we didn't even really get to it yet, is the effect that this is having on the media. Because I think that that's probably one of the biggest issues here. So, just to give a few examples, Maddow, I already said this before, but she just flat out called for more NATO troops to be on Russia's border. The Intercept actually did a study of Maddow's show over like a time period that was, I think, a little over a month, and they found that 53% of all Maddow segments were about Russia. Every other issue combined 53%. Was less than that. Then there was a FAIR study, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. They do some great work, and they looked at MSNBC coverage, and they found that MSNBC covered Russia more in one day than Yemen, the issue of the genocide in Yemen, all year. Russia got more coverage in one day than Yemen all year. 5,000% more coverage. And listen, the point that very few people know about, because this isn't really reported on at all, but you know about it and other, progressive hosts know about it, is look, this is having a chilling effect on us. Because, for example, YouTube just decided we're going to label all outlets that are funded by foreign governments. And the idea is they're trying to scare people off of looking at certain outlets. So, for Tom Hartman works for RT, Ed Schultz works for RT. These are people who are not Vladimir Putin's mouthpieces, but they work for RT, and now there's a warning banner across the screen.
Wow, I did not even know that.
Like, for example, ever since they say, hey, Russian fake news affected the election in a negative way, we really need to take action on this. they changed the algorithms. Google and YouTube changed the algorithms, and now they deprioritize all independent creators. And they put an onus on outlets that are established outlets, corporate outlets, CNN, MSNBC, and all those kinds of outlets. And the reality is, Cenk, those outlets, I would argue, spread fake news a hell of a lot more than I ever did. And, you know, I'm talking about stuff like they referred to George W. Bush doing torture as enhanced interrogation because the administration wanted them to refer to it like that. They all, you know, were beating the war drum to go to Iraq. So, but they would never get punished. Establishment outlets would never get punished for doing fake news. But outlets that are independent outlets that don't do fake news are now deprioritized in the algorithms, and this is crushing left-wing media. So Alternet, for example, Cenk, they had a cut of, I think it was like 60% drop in their traffic. And this has happened with Truth Out, this happened with Truth Dig, and basically the idea is they're taking the fact that fake news exists, and they're going, okay, now we're now going to use this to crack down on all dissenting voices and independent media outlets, and it's a very convenient argument for the establishment to make to suit their ends. And look, the problem with that is, at the end of the day, I don't know what else to call that but McCarthyism and a Red Scare, because they're using the Russia issue to silence all dissent from independent media and just try to tamper our voices down.
So, on that front, again, I agree with you, and we agree on policy. So
another home run.
For bad purpose, yes. I mean, some of the stuff on RT propaganda from the Russians, yes. Is Tom Hartman's program propaganda? No, it's not. But you get the banner either way. Well, you could call Al Jazeera propaganda because they're run by the government of Qatar, and they're not going to say anything bad about Qatar. On the other hand, they do good news in other realms and cover things that the American government doesn't want you to see, right? And BBC, you could label them propaganda. They're owned by
what the fuck?
British government.
What point is he trying to make?
But we don't call them propaganda. And does the BBC constantly tear into British imperialism?
What is he talking about?
Etc. No, they tweak it. Make resistance, if you will, right? CNN is owned by giant multinational
You cannot lay on my keyboard,
that have
son.
their own agenda. I could argue that's propaganda for Time Warner. I could argue that MSNBC is propaganda for Comcast.
Fuck is he talking about?
It has a more direct effect on our policy issues than maybe even our government, right? Or someone else's government, the Venezuelan government, etc. So
what is he talking about?
And I think that there is fear-mongering going around. And by the way, they also wanted to beat up on Facebook and Google, the traditional television stations and networks. This allowed them to beat up on Facebook and Google. Do I think Pence is a dangerous guy?
He just defended Facebook and Google. He just defended Facebook and Google.
No, I don't think it's a big
wow.
Pence is president. But I don't want to make the same mistake as the other side and say, since I don't agree with those policy positions, I'm going to look the other way. So they say, well, I like Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen, so I'm going to look the other way from Trump's corruption on Saudi Arabia. I don't want to do likewise. So I don't like that they're cracking down on independent media. No one's more affected by that than we are. But because of that, I don't want to look the other way from Trump's corruption on Russia, which I think is enormously real. And which
what does that have to do with what Kyle said?
Money laundering is a massive crime.
So now it's money laundering again.
Why you do that? There's another end to it. So if our president
Okay, so he said money laundering is a massive crime, which we know. Cenk has this thing that he does where he emphasizes so in debate. I used to do a lot of debate, if you can't tell. But in debate, when you emphasize things that are like obvious, you do that because you don't know what you're talking about and you're trying to eat up time and you want to make it seem like it's a big deal. He's like, money laundering is a serious crime, and there's another end to that. Yeah, you money launder because you want to launder your money so you don't get it. Thank you so much, son. I appreciate that. But you money launder so you don't get caught with illegitimate money. That's the end. But it's a serious crime. Like, we know it's a serious crime. Why are you talking like that? It's pretty, like, Just go on with your point. But it's hard when you can't place emphasis on your point, especially because he's done switched up his conclusion about 10 times. When you can't place emphasis on the facts, you can't place emphasis on sound logic, you have to place emphasis on the obvious to make it sound like you know what you're talking about. And we all know that Cenk doesn't really know what he's talking about. So let's continue. It's almost done, people.
Foreign country, shouldn't we arrest them?
Yeah, so I support what Mueller's doing, and here's my prediction. I think he's gonna what do you do? Knocked out Flynn, knocked out Manafort. He's probably got some tricks up his sleeve, but Cenk, my point is, at the end of the day, you're never going to hear Mueller's getting Trump on treason, Mueller's getting Trump on a crime like that.
Treason's a loaded word. You could dismiss it. Look, I might get worked up one day and say, well, that sounds like treason. But in terms of convicting him on treason, I agree with you. But convicting him on money laundering is plenty. And by the way, if in return
for what
Trump got,
they can't indict him,
he promised Russia certain policy positions, well, that's as close to treason as it gets.
Again,
promising policy positions.
Did that with Israel and Saudi Arabia, so we have all the evidence we need, but they're not going down that path. They want to try to prove the harder case to prove on Russia. But my question to you is, isn't it they would have to impeach, right? Isn't it there an open legal question as to whether or not you can indict a sitting president?
Yeah, so I believe that impeachment is possible under certain circumstances.
What? You can impeach him right now. No, that's not the case. Oh, sweet Jesus.
No way the Republicans are going to impeach him.
Okay, so, once again, Cenk, let me clarify something, people. Impeachment can actually come from damn near absolutely nothing. He doesn't understand what the process is. So let me try to explain what he was trying to say. He said, I believe that in certain circumstances, impeachment could happen. No. Actually, you can be impeached for things that you have done pre-presidency. All an impeachment is saying that, hey, we want, because you vote for impeachment at the House. You don't go anywhere just because you've been impeached. It still has to go through the Senate, and then an investigation for your removal takes place. But an impeachment has very, very loose-fitting requirements, and the reason is so that you can initiate an investigation to see how serious a situation is with any sitting president. Like, for example, the reason that Nixon didn't want to go through impeachment is because when you get impeached, you get highly, highly scrutinized. Nixon probably would have been impeached, and then he would have been removed. Clinton probably would have been removed. Actually, maybe not. But the standards for impeachment are actually not that high. And once again, this is just Cenk bloviating about how he knows what he's talking about when he doesn't. But whatever. Anyway, we're almost done. We're almost done.
For that, and I think Mueller would be too embarrassed to bring that case up because it's, in my opinion, relatively minor. But if you're talking about money laundering of hundreds of millions of dollars, that's a massive case. And then the poll numbers of the Republicans start to slip back down to where they were about a month ago, minus 14 to the Democrats. And then all of a sudden, the Republicans will find some principle that they had forgotten they had. And yes, impeach him if that's the fact scenario.
Yeah, I don't know how it would play out in the minds of the American people if I actually think there's a more likely chance, not the scenario you gave, but Trump fires Mueller and then that leads to potential impeachment. I think that's more likely than the scenario that we were just talking, like he gets him on some sort of grand crime and then they move to impeach. Yeah, I just don't know. Even if all that were to unfold, just one second, even if all that were to unfold, I don't know politically I think that might actually hurt the Democrats, believe it or not.
No,
because, okay, if you say, hey, people care about putting food on the table and paying their light bill and, focusing on stuff like that. So even if I were to agree with you on all the substance, like I said before, I don't know if the politics of it are going to line up. But, Cenk, I hear you. Trump is a terrible guy. No, I understand that. You're doing it for principled reasons. And my point is, listen, even if you want to take a principled stand, there's already so much. Like, Trump already violated the Emoluments Clause on day one of his campaign, Cenk. Like, the guy, he does business in 12 different countries, okay? He takes money from all different foreign governments, not just Russia. And like I said, I think there's an even clearer case. He did Israel, Saudi Arabia, and
Exactly.
Turkey. So all that stuff is there. We already have the case for emoluments. So this stuff is a lot harder to prove in a court of law when you have to prove intent and all that other stuff. So I just...
You don't have to prove intent. You don't have to prove intent.
Yeah.
That's a... I don't know why. People think that is a thing.
If we could get the establishment to agree, and that's why they got him out, great, because he also broke the law in that regard. But again, realistically, they're not going to do that, and that is deeply frustrating. So, but that doesn't mean that they also shouldn't investigate Russia. And so, in terms of that investigation, look, let's just go over it real quick. All the stuff, not even all the stuff, just a quarter of the stuff that's public. Don Jr. and Eric Trump have both said, yes, we got money for the golf courses and our properties from the Russians.
Okay, we're talking about laundering.
One was in 2008, one was later.
Not from the Russians, from people who live in Russia.
Reporter, they said, where'd you get the money? You guys went bankrupt all these times. Where'd you get the money for the golf courses? And Eric Trump said, oh, the Russians. And apparently they really, really like golf. Oh, yeah. Okay, and there's a server in Pennsylvania, in the middle of Pennsylvania.
I wish I saw Kyle's face.
All the top cybersecurity experts in the world say it keeps getting pinged by Russia. 80% of the pings are from Russia. You know who's pinging it? Alpha Bank. They don't know what the pings are. But that ain't no coincidence.
I think that story was retracted.
It was.
Retracted.
It doesn't exist.
I'll send you the article. There's an article in the Intercept which lists that among articles that have been. They said we messed up this one.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. I'll read it. But last night,
Cenk's trying to wave it off.
They seem to have excellent evidence. The other 18% of the pings, by the way, were coming from the DeVos family. Another wild coincidence. And then we know Eric Prince, also from the DeVos family, went to Seychelles and met with the Russians and some Gulf country people in a place where they wouldn't be caught having a secret meeting. Why is Eric Prince going to have a secret meeting with the Russians? Because they don't have a deal? And so...
With the Russians, I hate that.
You're preaching to the choir, and I think it's even worse than
Thank
what
you.
you're laying out, because I think he did money laundering for the Russian mafia,
which I totally
is arguably
agree.
Worse than doing it for, I don't know, some government officials. So I think there's enough there. But again, I think where I differ from you is I think that the effects of how this is all playing out and the consequences of the hyper focus on that issue is just leaving so many stones unturned and leaving the most important arguments the Democrats should be making at the side of the road, along with the media, the same thing. And just the final thing I want to say real fast is, so there was a story, I should probably send it to you because I don't know if you saw this, because I think it was only in one outlet. I think it was the International Business Times. Nobody else picked it up. But there was a story that basically proved collusion between Donald Trump and the predatory payday lender industry, to the point where they gave him some ridiculous amount of money in a variety of different ways. They gave it to Mick Mulvaney, his head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They gave it to him at his inauguration. It was some ridiculous. I think it was over $1 million they gave him at his inauguration. And then they scrapped all of the rules on the predatory payday lending industry that were supposed to go into place and made it so that they're allowed to charge 950%. And again, we can trace all these lines here to show exactly how corrupt they are and exactly how much they're screwing over regular people. And my concern, Cenk, is nobody's talking about this. And this is the stuff where you hammer him and you can win an election.
Exactly.
And I think that it's mostly blowing off steam when we talk about the Russia thing, because there's so much conspiracy mongering over it and leaps of logic that it makes the Democrats look unhinged.
Yeah, and so look, when you say Rachel Maddow shouldn't cover Russia with 53% of her stories, I say, of course, that's wildly.
I would hope, yeah.
Yeah, that's wildly disproportionate and preposterous, right? But when you say conspiracy theories regarding Russia, that's where you lose me.
There
That's where
are.
I'm frustrated.
You haven't presented any evidence.
Why is he fired every
Listen. He keeps answering his, like, Kyle presents facts to him and really sound logic, and then his questions are his responses. First of all, he's like, I don't see what conspiracy theories you're talking about. Okay, well, give me evidence. Well, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? Why is it? For the 50,000th time, people, he said, Kyle said, I said, Tim said, AJ said, Jimmy Dore, any independent journalist that you can think of that is somewhat, for the most part, objective, we've all said there's a 100% chance that Trump money laundered. There's a 100% chance that Trump is guilty of a lot of things. But money laundering does not equal election rigging. Nor does money laundering give Putin the ability to hack the entire general election. It's ludicrous. And anyway, we're going to hear this last little part.
Because he did it.
He fired. Okay, so first of all, let me just go ahead and clarify this before we continue. He's talking about when Trump fired Comey. I think that if anybody's been paying attention, Comey deserved to be fired. Right? He deserved to be fired. If you need us to link a bunch of articles about all the things that Comey has done, the conflict of interest that he's displayed, the times that he's lied under oath, the gross is either quote unquote gross incompetence or just total corruption. I think those are both pretty good reasons to fire somebody. But anyway, let's hear Kyle's response.
You're disregarding the fact that there are like 6 or 7 different stories that have officially been retracted. Those are the conspiracies I'm talking about.
Officially.
The conspiracy mongers who jump to conclusions and then they have to retract the story a week and a half later. So that's what I'm referring to. And you've seen those articles. I'm sure you have.
And Kyle, the story you referenced was, unfortunately, in this insanely corrupted system that we have, run-of-the-mill corruption. And the establishment is never going to convict him on that or go after him on that because they all do the same thing.
I know, but
that's his point. That's his point.
Their donors exactly what they want.
So we should ignore that.
But that's what's driving me crazy though, Kyle, which is that like we agree on all that stuff, but that doesn't mean and we should let Russia go.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you want to get him on money laundering. You want to do the investigation. I just told you 1,000 times. I support what Robert Mueller's doing. But my whole point, Cenk, my whole argument is everybody needs to pump their brakes a little bit if you're on the Democratic side, because there's a lot of overreaching going on this issue. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but there's also a lot of downsides to over-focusing on it, like the 1,000 I just mentioned, the effect on media, and all that other stuff, the weak arguments of the Democrats, so on and so forth. So I think at the end of the day, our agreement will remain simply on money laundering. But the effects of all this and everything outside of that, I don't think that we're going to see eye to eye on that.
So that's pretty much the end of the video. But I will say this. That video actually made me gain a lot more respect for Kyle. Not saying I didn't respect him before. Don't misconstrue my words. But what I am saying is that, like I said, I'm not like I'm because I am involved in the game and I'm like hyper vigilant on certain. I know he's pandering to his audience because I know a lot of his audience comes from TYT. A lot of his audience comes from TYT. Some of them, a lot of them, may be neoliberal or naive. So he doesn't really focus on the stuff that I focus on, for example, and that's fine. So I didn't know if he was, where that leaves him as far as his stance with Russia and all that stuff. But this made it pretty clear that Kyle knows what the fuck he's talking about. And I am so happy that Kyle set Cenk straight on a lot of this stuff. It's important that this happened, and I hope that you all share this because, like I said, Kyle has a huge following. He has a huge fan base. And now, I remember in the beginning, I said that I was a little bit uncomfortable with how much he focused on Trump. like as far as the little things that he does and says. But now I understand why he does, because what he is saying is, which is the same thing that I say, especially now that he's pretty much totally succumbed to the deep state, which he's saying that I want these people to be held accountable. But there's a right way to do it. And I totally agree with that. I've said all the time, I said, I don't care. It's not even about Trump, the Russian investigation and my pushback on the investigation has nothing to do with Trump. It's about what Kyle said, in which I talk about in all my videos. It's what that means to the rest of our democracy, what that means to the rest of our institutions, what that means to people like us, independent journalists, what that means to people like you all, and the story that your kids will learn in their history books about what happened in the 2015-2016 Democratic primary and the 2016 election. I 1000% agree with pretty much, I think, everything that Kyle said. And he even said, like, we needed to hold the Democrats accountable as well. Like, it's just that we know a lot more now than we did before. I think that, so like I said, I truly feel like I have a much better understanding now of why Kyle, he has his focus, because he still wants to see accountability. Whereas my goal, and it may just be because of my involvement, I have a little bit more political experience within the Democratic Party, so I know what makes them tick, and I understand how to take them down. And that may be why I gravitate towards that end, especially being as big of a, I worked for Bernie, so I was a huge Bernie supporter. And maybe he focuses more on the Trump stuff, because that needs an honest lens as well. And because he has a bigger progressive following than I do, I would say his is almost probably exclusively progressive, with a couple of conservatives sprinkled in. I have probably about half and half. It's important for people to really understand what we should be talking about with Donald Trump, instead of having the side conversations. Like when he brought up Syria, I want to jump on my chair. I'm like, thank God somebody else knows. And when he brought up Turkey, same thing. Thank God somebody else knows. When he brought up Saudi Arabia and their involvement in Yemen, these are things that we need to be discussing. And I'm very, very happy to see that Kyle, like I said, I watch him, so I know he talks about some of this stuff. But kind of hearing it, kind of being brought into the bigger picture of, this is why we need to focus on this, and this is a distraction. And I think that's the angle that he's coming from. So a lot of respect for him there. Of course, the same amount of respect for Cenk. He's a moron. He's an idiot. We know. I will take any comments for the next 2 minutes. Let me see. Anybody have any super chats? Did I miss any super chats? Robbie said, glad to hear you say that. Kyle isn't doing videos every day based on Trump's silly tweets. He goes over the substance of what Trump is actually doing, and I respect him for that. Not many on the left doing that now. You are correct. I tend to agree. I'm assuming you're talking about the comments I made about understanding why he talks about Trump a lot of the time. Yeah, I agree. I think that the left very rarely goes over substance. Like I said, I haven't heard anybody talking about Syria except for myself. I have to bring this up once a day. I'm sure y'all seen the pattern by now. We're in Syria. It's like the 50th time I've said that today. We're in Syria right now. We're about to institute a regime change right now. The left doesn't talk about this stuff enough. And even my colleagues don't talk about it enough. And for a plethora of reasons. Everybody has their focus. Everybody has their niche. But you can dedicate a video or two a week to calling out what needs to be discussed. And even if that's not always what you do. And that's perfectly fine. And like I said, it's not like Kyle never calls out the Russian nonsense. But he isn't perpetuating bullshit. And I think that is awesome. And I hope that this really drives more people. And I hope, go, if you don't follow Kyle, which I'm sure most of you all do, he has way more subscribers than I do, clearly. But I hope that going forward, he gets more support. And because people like him need to get more, have more clout when it comes to influencing the popular opinion. Let's see what else we got. Stephen Henson said, money laundering. Hello, Clinton Foundation. Yeah, right? It's once again, I guess because the subject is Russia, that Cenk keeps focusing on that. But that's like, it's laziness, because he doesn't want to talk about that. He's like, oh, you notice how instead of saying the Democrats, he says, oh, all of the establishment. You know, like, notice that, because he is keeping up a facade like he is objective and that he is not in the pockets of Democrats, when we have seen on paper he is. So by saying, what I mean by that is by saying the establishment, it's a way to encompass the Democrats without ever having to say their name. It's like whenever Joe Kennedy, when addressing the Dreamers, spoke in Spanish, forgetting that there are Arabs, there are Desis, there are Indians, there are, I mean, all kinds of languages. But you don't have, if you can not speak Arabic, especially saying some of the stuff that he said, if I don't have to speak Arabic and you know, have the visceral reaction that, oh, he's welcoming extremist Islam like in this country, like they don't want to address that. So he addressed all the Dreamers, forgetting that's only about 75 to 80% of Dreamers. The rest are from several different types of nations, speak several languages. So that's why that's why Cenk refused to call the Democrats what they are. That's Robbie said, connecting all Russian oligarchs to Putin is as dumb as connecting every Russian hacker under the sun to Putin in the Kremlin. I 100% agree. 100% agree. I see. Let me see. Thomas Riley said, the longer Kyle's attached to TYT, the more his credibility will suffer. No, I totally disagree. So you have to remember too that because he's attached to TYT, and this is probably one of the only benefits. This is something that the Humanists, if you don't know who, if you watch the Humanist Report, good guy, smart as well. But he was explaining to me that like being attached to TYT in some fashion, like what Secular Talk is like it protects them. So if he ever had to get into a copyright like legal dispute, TYT's lawyers would fight on his behalf, so he wouldn't have to exhaust his money doing it. So like that's why he stays with TYT. But if like once again, it's not often you see Kyle on TYT. It was actually very hard to find a picture of Kyle and Cenk together. That's why a lot of people said that even with the Justice Democrats, Cenk hijacked the Justice Democrats from Kyle and turned it into something that it wasn't supposed to be, and it was kind of hard to kind of pivot from that, and so it kind of like got away from him, in my opinion. The Justice Democrats did, and they kind of messed up. Let's see who else. Let's see if I get some of my regulars. Brian Crosby, Trump's a puppet. All U.S. POTUSes are puppets. Absolutely. Like I always tell people, the federal government is like a corporation. We didn't model the governments after corporations. We model the corporations after governments. The president is no more powerful than the CEO. If a boardroom decides to fire a CEO that day, guess where that CEO is going? Just like if a legislature decides to fire the president, guess where that president is going? It doesn't matter what executive order he has at his disposal. The operative prefix in president is preside. You make sure people don't eat each other alive. That's your job, is to preside, not to dictate, right? It's a dictator. Not to, like, so for example, I was a quote unquote presiding officer when I did high school debate. I didn't dictate the outcome. I facilitated votes. I made suggestions and we took votes on it. But if they disagreed with me, they could. Then whatever I wanted didn't matter. That's the president is a puppet. Like that's what it. I mean, it's a good thing sometimes. That's because that's partially how representative democracy works. But then there's other times, like right now, where the deep state kind of controls the outcome of. They are the puppet master. Robbie. Is Michael Tracy still with TYT? I think he is. I don't know. Michael Tracy's kind of been like, I used to have like a lot of respect for his logic, but I feel like he's just a contrarian. Like once he feels an opinion is becoming too popular, he just like wants to fight against it. Like he said that the memo was a nothing burger, and I'd actually, if you all recall, I didn't report on the memo the first night it dropped. I reported on it when it was about to drop, and I reported on it about a day or so afterwards because I knew that there was more information that was going to come out. But he was like, "Oh yeah, there's nothing in it." No, there's a lot in that memo. Like once again, they were investigating someone, an informant that volunteered to be an FBI informant, and claiming that the reason for their investigations is a result of conversations from a wiretap of him and being in a room with Russian oligarchs, and the wiretap was on him because he volunteered to be tapped. And then, mind you, the first story explaining that to us was from Washington Post, and then the second story was also from Washington Post, leaving all the convenient details out as Washington Post tends to do. So yeah, Rob, I still like him. I definitely still like Michael Tracey. I disagree with him sometimes. I disagree with him on Twitter pretty recently. Not necessarily disagree with him. Like, look, you might want to take a step back, homeboy, and read this a little bit deeper. Because we definitely, I think every independent journalist, because we want to be on top of every breaking story, we comment so fast sometimes. I'm even guilty of this, that we don't wait until more details come out to figure out if it's bullshit or not. All of us are guilty of this. So, well, like I said, I do think Michael is a little bit of a contrarian. If it's a popular opinion, he's not really like. I think that's why originally he was so against the Russian investigation. Now, because it's becoming more popular to be against the Russian investigation, he's like, I don't know. I think that it's a bunch of nothing burgers. This is stupid. This is. But yeah, but he seems to be like a pretty honest guy. I don't think that he's like bought off or anything like that. You know, we can disagree. I don't have a problem with disagreeing with people that I like that I think are genuine. There are people, however, like on the neoliberal reporting side and on the neoconservative/conservative reporting side, that I do not like, because their goals are to fearmonger and play to the fears of their base, into the insecurities of their base, and reaffirm any bullshit their base believes simply for clicks of reaffirmation, and that is dangerous as hell. Those are the type of people that I don't like. Oh, like Cenk, for example, or Michael Christensen, or if you know, what's that bitch name? The roaming millennial, like them. I hate them so much because they're dangerous. They perpetuate. I mean, there's a guy. I was Matt Christensen. I literally quoted Harvard studies to this guy. And he was like, I don't believe those. Why? They're making it up. That's what he said. They're making up things that CEOs told them directly. So, you know, it is what it is. You can't control all that stuff, but I can control what I talk about here, and hopefully help you all understand the dynamics of independent media a little bit more. Think about it like this, people. If any of you all right now who are watching are conservative, which I hope so, but if you are conservative, think about the fact that Trump has pretty much been in lockstep with the establishment pretty much ever since he got elected, right? One or two instances where he wasn't, and then they're right back on track. Boom, right? All of a sudden, he loves the GOP, and of course, mind you, a lot of independent media got famous on the conservative side, had become famous because of Donald Trump's little era. Just like a lot of progressives, including myself, became famous because of the Bernie Sanders era. The difference between us and them, or myself and them, is that they have shifted. Because at first, once again, they kind of like, they bloviated about Trump because he looked anti-establishment. They thought he was different. They thought he would be an instrument of change. And it's totally not true. He's been killing jobs. He's not been looking out for the little guy. Even the few tax breaks on the upper middle class are temporary. The tax breaks to the poor people are minimal and, once again, temporary. He's been colluding with Israel, with Syria, with Qatar, with Jordan, with, Turkey. He's put troops back in Syria. So all the reasons that the conservative or the MAGA reporters had for supporting Trump, it kind of went out the window. And then what they do instead, however, if they legitimately, like, politically don't agree with Trump and they can't bring themselves to doing that, what they do is then start focusing on, like, social justice warrior shit, which I guess is cool, except for the way they focus on social justice warrior nonsense is like, whoo, it's dangerous. They make claims like, oh, there's no such thing as racism. That's what. Like, if it's not explicit, then it doesn't exist. They said there's no such thing as institutional racism, even though we literally had a Kansas representative say that we can't legalize marijuana because black people can't have it. But he's like, oh, but in the Constitution, it's not illegal for black people to, in the Constitution, Jim Crow doesn't exist. So just like, of course, like with homosexuality, you remember when equal rights for marriage got legalized, and of course, homophobia just totally disappeared. Remember when slavery ended, racism just went right out the window. Yeah. So that's why that is dangerous. I don't really agree with that approach either. I think you can address the social justice warrior situation by caveating saying, look, I'm not saying that there are not marginalized people who still exist in this world. If you don't think there are, you need to travel somewhere. You can literally all over the United States, you can see it. But travel outside of this world, South America has it much worse race-wise as well. India, anywhere in the Middle East. So, yeah, with that being said, though, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you all later. I have a couple more videos going up, but for this time, I'm going to take a break before I do my show this evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mikasa Sukasa on American Freedom Radio. We're going to talk about this a little bit, and then some other stuff that happened today. But other than that, always remember, ladies and gentlemen, find your balance. Peace.